The afternoon sun spilled over Washington, D.C., its golden light filtering through gauzy curtains into the lavish apartment of Karoline Leavitt, a vibrant 27-year-old who had carved her name into the annals of history as the youngest White House press secretary. Her sanctuary near the White House was a haven of grace, cream-colored walls adorned with delicate watercolor paintings, a plush velvet chaise cradling her as she sank into its embrace, the faint perfume of lavender and rosewater drifting through the air. She wore a navy blue blazer draped over a chair, its collar adorned with a small silver cross that shimmered like a captured star, a tender relic of her New Hampshire roots. That cross wasn't mere jewelry, it was a heartbeat, a whispered vow of faith that had guided her through every storm. As she stretched, her chestnut hair catching the light, the stillness shattered with the insistent ring of her phone. President Trump's name glowed on the screen, and her breath hitched, a thrill racing through her veins. "Caroline!" his voice roared, thick with urgency and gravelly resolve. "There's a religious case at the D.C. local court. A band of Christians suing. They've been barred from praying in public. Go now. Watch it unfold. Bring me every detail." His words were a lightning bolt, electrifying her senses, leaving no space for doubt or delay. Her heart swelled. This was a summons to stand for something sacred. Her apartment was a mirror to her soul, orderly, resolute, alive with purpose. On her oak desk, documents rested in pristine stacks, each paper a testament to her meticulous mind. Her wardrobe stood ready, tailored suits and crisp blouses hanging like soldiers awaiting orders. Today she chose understated elegance, a silky white blouse that clung softly to her frame, black pants hugging her legs with quiet confidence, and that navy blazer, the silver cross glinting as she fastened it on. It was her ritual, her shield, a piece of her childhood, of Sunday hymns and her grandmother's gentle hands, carried into the whirlwind of her life as Trump's voice. Crises were her daily bread, but this task stirred something deeper, a resonance that thrummed in her chest. Faith wasn't abstract to Caroline. It was the fire in her bones, the compass of her courage. She snatched her keys, her pulse a wild drumbeat, and dashed to her sleek black SUV parked in the shadowed garage. The engine growled to life, a beast answering her call, and she plunged into the city's arteries, horns blaring, traffic pulsing like a living thing. NPR crackled through the speakers, a reporter's voice weaving tales of the day, but she silenced it with a trembling hand. Her mind was a honed dagger, slicing through distraction, locked on the mission ahead, a divine thread pulling her toward destiny. Caroline thrust open the glass doors of the D.C. local court, stepping into a maelstrom of sound and stifling heat. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of old wood and sweat, a chaotic orchestra of murmurs swelling around her like a restless tide. The room thrummed with life, ordinary souls tangled in petty dramas, a man in a rumpled jacket awaiting a traffic fine, a woman with tired eyes clutching a contract dispute. In the clerk's corner, keyboards clattered like distant gunfire, a relentless rhythm beneath the noise. She glanced at her watch, 2:53 p.m., the seconds ticking down to the hearing Trump had charged her to witness. Her hazel eyes scanned the rows of worn wooden chairs, settling on one in the middle, its surface scarred by years of restless hands. She sank into it, her document bag, a sleek leather satchel, resting at her feet like a faithful hound. Her phone glowed in her palm, its screen a blank canvas for the truth she'd capture. The silver cross on her neck caught the harsh fluorescent light, casting tiny prisms across her blouse, a quiet defiance she didn't notice. But others did, their gazes lingering with curiosity or suspicion. The courtroom wasn't grand, its walls crowded with faded notices and stacks of yellowing files. Yet it felt suffocating, a labyrinth of clutter and unspoken rules. To her left, a middle-aged man slouched in a faded t-shirt emblazoned with "I am king," his fingers drumming idly on his phone, his presence loud in its carelessness. To her right, a young woman glittered under an oversized necklace, its gaudy shine rivaling a chandelier, whispering secrets to her lawyer with a smirk. Caroline's brow creased. Dress codes here were a myth, it seemed, but her heart fixed on her purpose. A group of Christians, their spirits aflame, suing the government for silencing their prayers in a local park. This was Trump's crusade, a banner he'd raise for conservatives, and she was his eyes, his heartbeat in this shadowed arena. The wooden door behind the judge's bench groaned open, and Judge Charles Hargrove stepped forth, a figure chiseled from granite and time. At 62, he carried the weight of decades. Salt and pepper hair swept back with military precision, wire-rimmed glasses teetering on his hawkish nose. His black robe, pressed so flawlessly, seemed to defy the chaos around him. The crowd fell silent, a reverent hush descending as he claimed his throne, his cold, piercing eyes raking over them like a predator sizing its prey. "All rise!" thundered James Wilson, a bailiff whose towering frame and ebony skin radiated quiet strength, his voice a deep bell-tolling order. Caroline rose, her phone cradled like a lifeline, her gaze tracing Hargrove's every move. He slammed his gavel down, the sound a cannon shot reverberating through her chest. "This is a court of law, not a playground for your eccentricities," he proclaimed, his voice a low growl, sharp as a blade forged in years of dominion. Cases unraveled swiftly under his iron hand. A man fined $50 for a parking blunder. His head bowed in defeat. A woman laid on rent. Her plea met with a curt nod and a warning. Caroline's pen flew across her notebook, ink bleeding her observations. Hargrove was a machine, relentless, efficient, yet his rulings carried no warmth, no trace of mercy. She glanced at the "I am king" man as he shuffled forward, his shirt a garish taunt. Hargrove said nothing. The necklace woman rose, her jewelry clinking softly. No reprimand. Caroline's frown deepened, a knot of unease tightening in her stomach. Something was off, a dissonance she couldn't name. Then Hargrove's eyes locked on her, mid-sentence, his hand freezing over a sheaf of papers. His gaze narrowed behind those wire-rimmed glasses, a spark of recognition flaring. He knew her, the poised figure from White House briefings. "Miss Leavitt," he said, his voice ice wrapped in a tremor of hesitation. The name a dagger thrown into the silence. The room turned, whispers curling like smoke as others caught the thread. "That cross," he pointed, his finger trembling slightly, his tone hardening into a wall of steel. "It has no place here. This courtroom is a sanctuary of neutrality, not a shrine." Caroline's eyes darted to the walls. No sign, no rule barred it. She stood, her heart pounding a fierce rhythm, her voice rising clear and resonant, a song of unshaken resolve. "I'm Karoline Leavitt, White House Press Secretary, here to observe a case on official duty. This cross is mine, a personal treasure, safeguarded by the First Amendment. It violates nothing." Hargrove's face tightened, his glasses slipping, a storm brewing in his stare. "Duty or not, it's a disruption. This isn't your chapel," he snapped, his gavel crashing down like a judge's verdict on her soul. James Wilson tilted his head, his dark eyes keen. Mrs. Thompson, the clerk with her gray hair coiled into a severe bun, paused her typing, her breath catching as she watched. The "I am king" man and the necklace woman exchanged furtive glances, astonishment flickering. Why her and not them? Caroline's fingers tightened around her phone, a quiet fury igniting within her, warm and fierce. This wasn't about her presence. It was the cross, a symbol that seemed to sear Hargrove's very being with disdain. "Sir, I have the right to wear it under the First Amendment," she said, her voice a steady flame, burning bright and unbowed. Hargrove sliced through her words, his tone a whip's crack. "Don't presume to school me on law. Step to the bench, now." The room held its breath, a collective inhale as Caroline drew a deep, steadying breath, her heels clicking softly on the ancient wooden floor, each step a quiet rebellion. She reached the defendant's stand, the silver cross glowing against her navy blazer like a lighthouse in a gale. Hargrove towered above, his face flushing crimson, his grip on the gavel so tight his knuckles gleamed white. "What are you doing here with that thing, Miss Leavitt?" he demanded, his voice a low snarl, sharp as a blade honed by resentment. "I'm here on duty, and I have every right to wear it," she replied, her thumb discreetly sliding over her phone, the recorder humming to life, a secret vow to capture his tyranny. He slammed the gavel, the sound a thunderous echo that rattled her bones. I've seen your kind, thinking faith gives you license to defy anywhere. This is my courtroom, and I declare it forbidden. That's contempt of court. Caroline's brow furrowed, her gaze flickering to the untouched I am king man, his shirt a silent affront, and the necklace woman, her baubles a brazen display. Sir, I'm not defying, she countered, her voice a rock amid his tempest. If there's a ban, show me the written law. Hargrove smirked, a cold, hollow twist of his lips that chilled her blood. A law? I am the law here. You strode in, disrespecting my domain, and now you dare demand proof? The gavel crashed again, Mrs. Thompson flinching, her fingers trembling over the keys. An older man in the back muttered, "That necklace outshines the sun. Why is he blind to it?" The crowd's whispers grew, a restless tide. Caroline's heart thundered, but she chose wisdom over war. If I've broken a rule, I deserve a clear explanation, she said, her hands subtly adjusting her phone, ensuring every venomous word was preserved. Hargrove sneered, his voice dripping with scorn. Here's your explanation. $500 for contempt. Pay it today, Miss Levitt. Perhaps this will teach you reverence. This isn't your pulpit or your performance. The crowd gasped, a collective shock rippling through them. Mrs. Thompson's eyes widened, unease pooling in their depths, her fingers hovering as if afraid to move. 500? A young woman whispered to her friend, her voice trembling with disbelief. The I am king man let out a stifled chuckle, quickly smothered as Hargrove's glare scorched his way. Caroline stood unyielding, her sharp hazel eyes piercing his, a quiet storm brewing within her. I understand your ruling, sir, she said, her voice even but laced with a steely resolve that made the air quiver. But why not them? The printed shirts, the gaudy jewelry. Why me alone? Hargrove's face blazed red, his knuckles whitening around the gavel as if it were his last anchor. Don't twist this. You're the only one brazen enough to flaunt a religious symbol here. She nodded faintly, a spark of clarity igniting. This wasn't justice. It was a vendetta, a crusade against the faith she held dear. Mrs. Thompson resumed typing, her hands shaking as if the keys burned. James Wilson crossed his arms, a shadow of empathy in his steady gaze. He'd seen this before, but never so raw. The whispers swelled, phones slipping out despite the rules, capturing the drama in stolen frames. Caroline's mind raced. This wasn't just a fine, it was a flame, a chance to illuminate a hidden rot. Are you finished, sir? She asked, her voice soft yet cutting, a velvet blade slicing through his bluster. Hargrove faltered, unnerved by her composure, his smirk flickering like a candle in the wind. Not yet. Pay and sit. We've business to tend. But she stepped closer, her hand resting on the bench's edge, her eyes locked on his with a fierce, unyielding light. I'll pay, but we're far from done, she said, her words low, brimming with a determination that sent a shiver through the room. His smirk wavered, a crack in his armor as he sensed the ground shifting beneath him. Karoline Leavitt stood resolute at the defendant's stand, the silver cross a radiant ember against the storm Hargrove had unleashed. He'd find her $500, his triumph etched in the flush of his cheeks, his hand still clutching the gavel like a scepter of power. But she wasn't broken. She was alight, her spirit blazing with a passion that made the air hum. The crowd watched, breathless, their eyes wide with awe and tension. Mrs. Thompson's anxious gaze darted between them, her fingers poised over the keys as if afraid to miss a beat. James Wilson stood with arms crossed, his towering frame a silent sentinel, sensing a tide about to turn. Hargrove broke the silence, his voice a bark. Did you hear me, Miss Leavitt? $500, payable today. Sit down. We've other matters. He banged the gavel, a hollow attempt to reclaim control, but Caroline didn't budge. She drew a deep breath, her chest rising with purpose, and placed her hand on the bench's edge, her touch steady as her voice rang out, clear and sharp as a bell in the hush. Sir, before I sit, I need to set a few things straight, for the record. Hargrove frowned, caught off guard by her unwavering calm, his authority teetering like a house of cards in a gale. The record? You've no right to demand anything here, he snapped, but a quiver betrayed him, a crack in his fortress of command. Caroline's lips curved into a faint smile, not taunting, but the radiant confidence of a woman who held truth in her hands. From her satchel, she drew a gold-gleaming card, its edges catching the light like a blade, and held it aloft for all to see, a beacon in the dimness. I'm Karoline Leavitt, White House press secretary, serving under President Donald Trump, she declared, her voice a melody of strength and grace. But what you don't know, Judge Hargrove, is that I'm not just a voice. I've steeped myself in the law, deeper than you might ever guess, with a heart that beats for justice. The crowd erupted in gasps, a wave of shock rolling through them. The I am king man's jaw dropped, his phone forgotten. The necklace woman whispered furiously to her lawyer, her eyes wide. Hargrove froze, his gavel stilled midair, a statue of faltering power. That changes nothing, he muttered, his voice fraying at the edges. But Karoline didn't let him reclaim the reins. She stepped closer to the podium, her presence a force that filled the room, her voice echoing like a hymn of defiance. Your rules or your personal scorn? I'm here on the president's orders to witness a case of Christians fighting for their prayers. This cross, she touched it tenderly, her fingers lingering as if caressing a memory, is my freedom, my soul's song, protected by the First Amendment. You find me for it. But do you truly know the law? Hargrove's face twisted, a storm of defiance and doubt warring within him, his glasses slipping further as he struggled to push back. I don't need your lectures. This is my courtroom, and I decide, he roared, but his voice cracked, a hollow echo. Karoline cut through his bluster, her tone rising like a crescendo, firm and unshakable. You're wrong, sir. The law isn't yours to bend. Let me remind you, Church of Lukumi Babalu, IA versus City of Hialeah, 1993. The Supreme Court ruled that banning religious symbols without just cause violates the Constitution. Where's your cause, Judge? Or is it merely that my faith offends you? The room fell into a stunned, electric silence, the air thick with the weight of her words. A few dared to snap photos, their flashes like lightning in the hush. Hargrove's mouth opened, but no sound came, his authority crumbling beneath her gaze. Mrs. Thompson held her breath, her fingers hovering as if spellbound. James Wilson nodded subtly, a spark of admiration in his steady eyes. He'd seen battles, but never a defendant turn the tide so swiftly. Karoline pressed on, her voice a symphony of justice, each note ringing with purpose. You fined me $500 for contempt, but look around. This man, she pointed to the I am king wearer, his shirt a loud defiance, wears a printed t-shirt that mocks your dress code, yet you're silent. Her, she gestured to the necklace woman, her jewelry a dazzling affront. She shines like a beacon, but you say nothing. Only my cross, a quiet Christian symbol, stirs your rage. That's not law, sir. That's prejudice, raw and unmasked. Hargrove trembled, his face shifting from crimson to a ghostly pale, his hands shaking as if the gavel might betray him. You're slandering me, he stammered, his voice weak, unconvincing, a shadow of its former bite. Karoline didn't relent, her spirit soaring as she raised her phone, a quiet weapon gleaming with truth. I've recorded every word since you summoned me here. I've texted the White House, reporting this injustice. You want to find me? Go ahead. But this doesn't end with your gavel. The crowd erupted in whispers, a voice crying out, She's right! A clap breaking the silence, quickly hushed by James Wilson's stern glance. Hargrove floundered, grasping for control, his voice trembling. Miss Leavitt, I can withdraw the fine. No need to escalate this. He banged the gavel feebly, a desperate plea masked his command, but Karoline shook her head, her gaze a piercing flame that burned through his facade. Withdrawing it because of who I am only proves you're wrong deeper, sir. This isn't about me. It's about how you wield this court. I demand you review the past 6 months' records, all fines tied to religious symbols. And I propose mandatory First Amendment training for every soul here, including you." The courtroom exploded. Applause thundered. An older man in the back leaping to his feet, shouting, "That's right." A young woman whispered, "Who is she?" "She's incredible," Mrs. Thompson typed furiously, her eyes gleaming as if witnessing a miracle unfold. James Wilson's lips twitched into a discreet smile. He'd known she was extraordinary from the moment she stood. "You think I'm just a spokesperson," Karoline said, her voice dropping to a velvet thunder, rich with power and unshaken love. "But I've stood beside President Trump through relentless legal wars, elections, policies, every storm. I taught myself law, pouring my heart into books and battles to defend him, and now I wield it to defend myself, and every soul silenced by your bias. You've made a grave mistake, Judge Hargrove." She placed her White House card on the bench, its gold edge a silent challenge, and stepped back, her eyes never leaving his, a lighthouse unwavering in the tempest. Hargrove's mouth opened, but no words came. He knew he'd clashed with a force not just brilliant, but radiant with purpose. The crowd roared again, scattered applause breaking like waves, Mrs. Thompson's fingers flying to preserve the moment as if it were sacred scripture. James Wilson stepped closer, his eyes alight with respect, a quiet salute to her valor. Hargrove slumped into his chair, his authority fracturing before their eyes, the gavel trembling in his grasp. Karoline stood tall, the silver cross no longer just a symbol of faith, but a banner of victory, glowing with the fierce, tender light of her spirit. She stepped out of the D.C. local court into the embrace of the late afternoon sun, its warmth kissing her face as the clock chimed 3:30 p.m. The silver cross caught the light, a radiant spark against her navy blazer, as she paused at the glass doors, her heart still racing with the fire of the fray. Her phone buzzed in her hand. She'd sent the recording to the White House with a breathless note. "Hargrove fined me for the cross. I handled it. Next steps?" Inside, the courtroom still hummed with electric awe, the older man in the back turning to his neighbor, his voice quaking with wonder. "I've never seen a judge toppled like that. She's a marvel." A young woman clutched her boyfriend's arm, whispering, "She's the White House press secretary. Can you believe it?" Mrs. Thompson, her hands trembling, printed the session transcript, the paper trembling as if it, too, felt the weight of what she'd witnessed. James Wilson slipped out, phone in hand, calling a colleague with a voice thick with pride. "You've got to hear this. A young woman just silenced Hargrove, left him speechless." The news spread like wildfire through parched grass, leaping from whispers to screens. Karoline hadn't even reached her SUV when her phone erupted. Cross in court was trending on X. She opened the app, her breath catching at the first tweet. "Judge fines White House press secretary $500 for wearing a cross. She fights back with law, leaves him dumbstruck." Cross in court. Hundreds of comments flooded in. "Who is she? Unreal. Hargrove's done." A major conservative voice tweeted, "Proof the system hates Christians. Thank you, Karoline Leavitt." She allowed herself a small, trembling smile, her heart swelling. This was only the beginning, a ripple destined to become a flood. By 4 p.m., President Trump's voice thundered across the digital landscape, his tweet a clarion call. "Karoline Leavitt, my amazing spokesperson, just taught a leftist judge a lesson in religious freedom. Legal genius. We won't let them crush faith." It racked up 50,000 retweets in 30 minutes, a tidal wave of support crashing over the nation. Fox News pounced, headlines blazing, "White House press secretary faces off with judge over cross, wins big." Her phone rang, Trump's senior advisor, his voice beaming with pride. "You did it, Karoline. The president wants this loud. Prep a statement." Meanwhile, Hargrove sat alone in his office behind the bench, the dim light casting long shadows over his ashen face. His phone buzzed incessantly. D.C. Judicial Council, reporters, old colleagues, all unanswered as he clutched a cold coffee mug, his hands trembling. She's just a girl, he muttered, his voice a broken whisper. How did this happen? But deep in his gut, he knew. He'd collided with a force far greater than himself, a woman whose courage outshone his decades of power. Mrs. Thompson couldn't stay silent, her loyalty to truth outweighing fear. She called a friend at a local paper, her voice low but firm. I've worked with Hargrove 12 years. He's always targeted Christian symbols. That girl was right. I've got notes. She pulled a small, leather-bound notebook from her drawer, its pages brimming with cases. Crosses fined, prayer badges scolded, while crude shirts and flashy jewelry slipped by unscathed. It was a risk, but after today, silence felt like betrayal. James Wilson acted too, gathering colleagues in the courthouse break room, his voice thick with emotion as he recounted the clash. I've counted 20 times this year. Hargrove fines folks for religious symbols. Rude t-shirts? He laughs them off. Levit exposed what we all knew but never said. A colleague nodded, eyes alight. I'll call the press. This needs out. By 5 p.m., Channel 7's reporter stood outside, filming live, her voice cutting through the dusk. Today, White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt was fined $500 for wearing a cross in court. She fought back, and now D.C.'s ablaze. Russian cross in court's hit 100,000 mentions. X erupted with stories. He fined me $200 for a prayer badge last year. I saw him scold a mom over a cross in a divorce case. A big account posted a shaky video, secretly filmed, Karoline holding up her White House card, her voice ringing strong, unshaken. It soared to 1 million views in hours, a beacon igniting hearts. Karoline sat in her SUV on a quiet street corner, the engine idling as she watched the news explode. She called her husband, a gentle businessman who anchored her wild spirit, her voice trembling with excitement. Honey, I just shut down a judge. This is about to get massive. He laughed, warm and steady. You always pull off the impossible. Stay safe, love. She nodded, hanging up, her fingers brushing the cross as an email from Trump's office flashed. Press conference tonight. We're turning this into a triumph. At home, Hargrove switched on the TV, his face splashed across the evening news. Judge faces backlash after fining press secretary. The bold headline mocked him as he shut it off, hands shaking. The Judicial Council's call, demanding answers by morning ringing in his ears. His 30-year career teetered, all because of a 27-year-old and her tiny, radiant cross, a symbol that had undone him. The next morning, the D.C. Judicial Council's office buzzed like a hive ablaze. Linda Martinez, a seasoned investigator with 2 decades grit, leading a frantic probe after Karoline's White House complaint. She stood before a long table, case files spilling like fallen leaves, her voice firm. 48 hours to report. Find every religious symbol tied to Hargrove. Karoline sat in her White House office, the morning sun painting her desk gold, prepping for the night's press conference at Trump's command. She replayed the recording, her heart swelling with each word, and emailed his advisor. X shows hundreds accusing Hargrove. Push this hard. Her phone buzzed relentlessly. Lawyers, reporters, supporters. A law student wrote, You inspire me. Hargrove fined my mom for a cross once. She smiled, tears pricking her eyes. This wasn't just her fight anymore. It was theirs. Mrs. Thompson marched into the investigation room, clutching her notebook, her voice quivering but resolute. 12 years with Hargrove, he's always hated crosses, hijabs, anything holy. Crude shirts, loud jewelry, he lets them slide. Linda flipped through, her eyes widening. September 14th, 2024. Man with cross fined $300 for disruption. October 20th, 2024. Muslim woman with hijab, $200 for inappropriateness. This is gold, Linda murmured. Thank you. James Wilson arrived offering a handwritten statement, his deep voice steady. 15 years as bailiff. He's fined religious folks 3 times more. One day he hit 5 with crosses, ignored 3 in vulgar shirts. Linda's team cross-checked, data emerging like a flood. Over the past year, 70% of religious symbol fines targeted Christians, averaging $250, double other penalties. Hargrove at home faced the council via Zoom, his voice frail, hands cradling his head. I didn't mean to be biased. Linda presented the numbers. Records show you fine crosses 80% harsher. Explain that. He fell silent, eyes downcast, Caroline's steely voice echoing in his mind, her First Amendment sword piercing his pride. I didn't realize, he mumbled. I thought I kept order. By noon, Linda's report was done, her tone grave. It's not just Hargrove. 3 other D.C. judges show milder bias, but he's the worst. Clear prejudice against Christianity. The council suspended him, erupting. Art, Cross in court. Hargrove out. Karoline shakes the system. At 6 p.m., Karoline stood in the White House briefing room, the mirror reflecting her blazer, the cross aglow. Trump clapped her shoulder, his grin wide. You made me proud, Karoline. Tonight, we show them freedom's untouchable. She nodded, stepping to the podium. Camera flashes a dazzling storm. Yesterday, I was fined for this cross, not because I erred, but because a judge thought he ruled above the law, she said, her voice resonating, a hymn of triumph and tenderness. I fought, not just for me, but for every soul crushed for their faith. Questions flew, her answers steady, law and data her shield. Hargrove watched, hands trembling, switching off the TV to sit in darkness. His phone overflowing, colleagues fleeing, reporters hounding. Thompson and Wilson's testimony stung most, trust shattered. He opened his laptop, reading Lukumi Babaluai, Caroline's words haunting him. She's right, he whispered. I was wrong. For the first time in 30 years, he felt small, calling the council, voice hoarse. I'm resigning, but I'll help fix this. 4 days later, Washington trembled with change. New rules banned unjust symbol, fines, training mandated. Karoline gazed from her office window at Pennsylvania Avenue, the cross a radiant emblem of a movement she'd birthed. X sang, D.C. rewrites laws, thank you, Karoline. Hargrove trained staff, raspy but earnest. I was blind, Levit taught me. Don't let bias rule you. Mrs. Thompson oversaw transparency. James Wilson trained bailiffs. Speak out, like she did. Trump laughed. You're a star. The faithful adore you. States followed. Texas, Florida, Ohio, reviewing courts. In Virginia, 5,000 roared as she spoke. That day, I just did my job. But when he fined my faith, I rose. For us all. The cross, viral, became resilience's flame. 3 months on, at the White House podium, she declared, 3 months ago, I stood for faith. Today, we've reshaped justice. A law student wrote, your cross gave me wings. Hargrove taught, justice bows to no bias. Trump called, you're my warrior. On the balcony, she touched the cross, whispering, freedom demands fighters. The council offered a national role. She smiled, ready. From one day, she'd rewritten laws, kindled hearts, proving one soul, one belief could shake the world.